Welcome to Top 10 Secret, the channel where chilling and haunting secrets are revealed. Today, we'll uncover the top 10 stories of screams in the darkness. Terrifying, spine-chilling tales that will keep you awake at night. Get ready, because what you're about to hear will make your heart race in the pitch-black shadows. Story 1. The Scream of Darkness. In a world where light had become a faint memory, the land was shrouded in eternal dusk. The skies bled crimson, and the air carried whispers of despair. Among the desolation roamed a figure known only as the Cursed One, a being caught between man and monster, bound by chains of serpentine shadows that slithered across his shattered form. No one knew who he once was, only that his presence heralded destruction. Once, he had been a warrior, a protector of a kingdom that had long since crumbled into ash. In his final battle, he had faced Serpentina, the goddess of serpents and shadow. But the fight was never meant to be won. Serpentina, amused by his defiance, cursed him with an unending torment. His body became her prison, and his soul was torn apart, piece by piece, to fuel her growing power. From his face, fractured and distorted, emerged screams that carried his agony, spreading fear and madness to all who heard them. Around him, snakes writhed, symbols of his guilt and despair, feeding on his suffering. In the outskirts of a barren wasteland lay a village, forgotten by time. Its people, desperate and weary, had once tried to save the Cursed One. They believed compassion could break his chains. But they did not understand the nature of the curse. It was a disease, consuming all it touched. As they approached him, the shadows around his body grew alive, and the snakes exhaled a venomous mist that rotted the earth and withered the trees. The villagers screamed as their bodies twisted unnaturally, their faces frozen in eternal anguish. Their souls were devoured by Serpentina, leaving behind hollow shells that wandered aimlessly, whispering cries of despair. The village became a cursed land, where the screams of the damned echoed endlessly, warning all who dared venture near. Amid the hopelessness, a young woman named Lyra appeared. She was no ordinary wanderer. Her eyes gleamed with a strange light, as though she carried within her the last remnants of hope. Lyra was the final descendant of the ancient warriors who had once sealed Serpentina away. The light in her heart, passed down through generations, was said to be powerful enough to banish the goddess once and for all. Lyra sought out the Cursed One, not out of pity, but because she saw him as the key to defeating Serpentina. When she found him, she was struck by the torment in his fractured face. His screams, though horrifying, did not frighten her. They saddened her. Beneath the monstrous exterior, she sensed a soul that longed for freedom. She reached out to him, her touch gentle. "You are not beyond saving," she said. For a brief moment, the snakes around him recoiled, and the shadows trembled. But as she poured her light into him, a sinister laugh echoed through the air. Serpentina appeared, her form monstrous and grotesque. Her body writhed with countless serpents, her eyes glowed crimson, and her voice slithered into their minds. "How touching," she mocked. "You think your feeble light can extinguish me?" Lyra stood her ground, her light shining brighter, but Serpentina was no ordinary foe. The goddess conjured illusions, showing Lyra visions of her loved ones, twisted and broken, blaming her for their suffering. The Cursed One, too, was tormented by the memories of his past, the lives he had destroyed, the screams he had caused. The darkness fed on their doubts, growing stronger. Realizing that Serpentina could not be defeated by light alone, Lyra made a desperate decision. She turned to the Cursed One, her voice steady despite her fear. "I will give you my light," she said. "Take it and use it to destroy her." The Cursed One hesitated, his shattered soul trembling at the thought of taking yet another life. But as Serpentina advanced, he knew there was no other way. Lyra placed her hands on his face, and her light surged into him, burning away the shadows and serpents that bound him. For the first time in centuries, he felt free. But freedom came at a cost. As the light consumed the Cursed One, he turned his gaze to Lyra. Her body had grown pale, her eyes dim, and her strength waned. Before he could thank her, a deafening scream pierced the air. Serpentina, instead of being destroyed, had found a new vessel. Lyra's body convulsed violently as black veins spread across her skin. Her eyes snapped open, glowing crimson, and her mouth twisted into an unnatural grin. "Foolish girl," Serpentina hissed, her voice now entwined with Lyra's. "You have given me exactly what I needed, a body of pure light to house my darkness." The Cursed One watched in horror as Lyra's form transformed into something monstrous. Her hands became clawed, her skin turned black and scaly, and her voice echoed with Serpentina's malice. The snakes that had once tormented him now crowned her as the Queen of Shadows. "You are free," she mocked, stepping toward him. "Free to witness the end." As she raised her hand, the ground beneath them cracked and split, releasing a torrent of shadow that consumed the land. The Cursed One felt his body begin to disintegrate, his newly freed soul dragged into the void. He screamed, but no sound came out. He could only watch as the world was swallowed by darkness, with Lyra, no Serpentina, standing at its center. The skies turned black, and the earth pulsed like a living, breathing entity. Serpentina's laughter echoed across the void, a chilling promise of eternal torment. The Cursed One, now trapped within the darkness, could see and feel everything. The suffering of countless souls, the despair of a dying world, and the faint, muffled cries of Lyra, still buried deep within Serpentina's grasp. There was no escape. The light was gone, and as the shadows consumed the last remnants of hope, the world fell silent, save for the endless echoing screams of the damned. This version heightens the horror and provides a truly haunting ending. Let me know if you'd like further refinements. Story 2: The Mirror of Eternal Fracture. In a forgotten village on the edge of a haunted forest, an ancient tale circulated in hushed whispers. It spoke of a cursed mirror hidden deep within a crumbling mansion, a mirror that revealed the truth of one's soul in the most horrifying form imaginable. Those who gazed upon it never returned the same, if they returned at all. The mirror was said to be guarded by Eris, a being neither alive nor dead, whose fractured face was a reminder of the price of vanity and the horrors of seeking forbidden truths. Long before Eris became the guardian of the cursed mirror, she was a celebrated beauty, known throughout her village for her flawless face and enchanting smile. Yet her beauty came at a cost. Eris was consumed by her vanity, willing to do anything to preserve her perfection. When whispers reached her of a magical mirror hidden in the forest that could grant eternal beauty, Eris was consumed by obsession. She ventured into the forest, guided by the soft flutter of black butterflies that seemed to beckon her deeper into the darkness. At the heart of the forest, she discovered a decaying mansion, its doors yawning open as if inviting her in. Inside, the air was thick and cold, and the walls were lined with mirrors reflecting distorted versions of herself, some older, others grotesquely beautiful. In the center of the grand hall stood the mirror, tall and cracked, its surface shimmering with an unnatural glow. Eris gazed into it, desperate for the promise of eternal beauty. At first, the reflection showed her as she wished to be, young, flawless. radiant. But then, the image began to warp. Cracks spread across her reflection's face, revealing rotting flesh and bare bone beneath. The reflection stared back at her with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. A voice emerged from the mirror, deep and resonant. Beauty is fleeting, but truth is eternal. Do you wish to see the truth of your soul? Terrified yet entranced, Eris nodded. In that instant, the mirror shattered, and its shards embedded themselves into her flesh. She screamed as the fragments burned her skin, carving her vanity and sins into her very being. Her once perfect face was left fractured and decayed, half consumed by death, half clinging to fragile humanity. The mirror had claimed her, binding her soul to its power. She became its eternal guardian, cursed to trap others as she had been trapped. Years turned to decades, and the tale of the cursed mirror spread far and wide. One fateful night, a traveler named Caleb arrived in the village. A scholar of the occult, Caleb was drawn to the legend, convinced that uncovering the mirror's secrets would bring him fame and fortune. The villagers begged him to reconsider, recounting stories of those who had gone before him and never returned. But Caleb, driven by arrogance and curiosity, ignored their warnings. He ventured into the forest, the black butterflies appearing almost immediately, swirling around him like a storm. Their presence grew heavier as he approached the mansion, their wings brushing against his skin like icy whispers. The mansion loomed before him, its decaying facade barely standing against the weight of time. As he stepped inside, the air grew suffocating, heavy with an unnatural stillness. The hallways were lined with mirrors, each reflecting a different version of Caleb. In one, he appeared older, his face gaunt and his eyes hollow. In another, his hands were drenched in blood. The reflections whispered to him, their voices low and taunting. Caleb tried to ignore them, pressing forward until he reached the grand hall. There she stood, Eris, the fractured guardian. Her presence was both horrifying and mesmerizing. Her eyes, one human and the other a dark void, bore into Caleb's soul. The cracks in her face seemed to shimmer, and butterflies fluttered around her like mournful sentinels. "Why have you come?" Eris asked, her voice echoing with both despair and menace. "I seek the truth," Caleb replied, his voice steady despite the fear creeping up his spine. "The mirror is said to reveal it." Eris tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "The truth is not a gift, it is a burden. Are you prepared to bear it?" Caleb nodded, his determination unwavering. Without another word, Eris stepped aside, revealing the cursed mirror. The mirror stood before Caleb, its surface fractured and pulsing with an unnatural light. As he gazed into it, his reflection stared back at him. At first, as he was. But then, the cracks began to spread. His reflection twisted, revealing his deepest fears and darkest secrets. He saw himself as a child, watching silently as a friend drowned, too afraid to act. He saw himself betraying loved ones for his own gain. He saw the shadow of death following him, a predator he had evaded but never escaped. Each vision was more horrifying than the last, peeling back the layers of his soul until nothing but raw, unfiltered truth remained. "Stop!" Caleb screamed, but the mirror did not relent. His reflection reached out, its skeletal hand breaking through the glass and grasping his throat. Caleb felt his soul being pulled from his body, his screams fading into silence as the mirror consumed him. Eris watched as Caleb disappeared into the mirror, his face now one of many trapped within its fractured surface. A single black butterfly emerged from the mirror, fluttering weakly before landing on her shoulder. She closed her eyes, her expression one of sorrow and resignation. The curse had claimed another soul. As she turned back to her eternal vigil, she whispered, "Another piece for the truth." The mansion remained silent, its walls filled with mirrors that whispered and screamed, each one holding a fragment of a lost soul. Outside, the forest grew darker, and the black butterflies multiplied, spreading the mirror's curse to all who dared approach. The legend of the cursed mirror lived on, its allure drawing the desperate, the curious, and the arrogant. But those who sought the truth found only despair, their souls forever fractured and bound to the mirror's eternal hunger. And Eris, neither alive nor dead, continued her watch, a broken soul trapped in a nightmare of her own making. Story 3. The Ghost of the Drowned Bride. In a small, forgotten village surrounded by endless marshes, there was a legend passed down through generations. The villagers spoke in whispers of a woman in white who haunted the swamp. Her long, dark hair clung to her pale face, her empty eyes staring into the void. She was called the Drowned Bride, a restless spirit trapped between life and death, her sorrow and rage echoing through the misty waters. Long ago, a young woman named Lila lived in the village. She was known for her ethereal beauty, with skin as pale as moonlight and hair as black as midnight. Lila was kind-hearted, yet fate dealt her a cruel hand. She fell in love with Edgar, a handsome but deceitful man who promised her the world. Their wedding day was a grand affair, but beneath Edgar's charming facade lay a heart full of greed. On the night of their wedding, Edgar led Lila to the edge of the swamp under the guise of a romantic walk. There, he revealed his true intentions. He had never loved her. Instead, he sought the dowry her family had promised, a small fortune that would allow him to escape the poverty-stricken village. But Edgar's greed knew no bounds. To ensure no one would come after him, he pushed Lila into the murky waters and held her down until the swamp claimed her life. As the air left her lungs, Lila's final thoughts were not of betrayal, but of an overwhelming sorrow. Her love had been pure, and she could not understand how it had turned into such darkness. The swamp grew silent as her body disappeared beneath the surface. But something lingered, a presence born of pain and vengeance. Days turned into weeks, and Edgar vanished from the village, but peace did not return. On the first full moon after Lila's death, villagers reported hearing haunting cries echoing through the swamp. A thick mist rolled into the village, and the air grew cold, carrying the scent of decaying water. Some claimed to have seen a woman in white standing at the edge of the swamp, her long hair covering her face. Those who ventured too close were never seen again. The villagers soon realized that the swamp had become cursed. Crops withered, livestock vanished, and the waters grew darker, as if poisoned by Lila's sorrow. The once vibrant community fell into despair, and the legend of the drowned bride was born. Years later, Edgar returned to the village, older but no wiser. He had squandered his stolen fortune and was now a broken man, seeking refuge in the place he had once fled. The villagers, knowing the truth of what he had done, refused to help him. Desperate, Edgar sought shelter near the swamp, unaware that the spirit of his bride awaited him. That night, as the moon hung low over the swamp, Edgar heard a soft, mournful song drifting through the mist. It was a melody he recognized, a song Lila used to sing. Drawn by the haunting tune, he stumbled through the marsh, the water rising around him with each step. The mist thickened until he could barely see, but the song grew louder, pulling him deeper. And then he saw her. Lila stood in the water, her white gown soaked and tattered, her hair dripping black strands that clung to her lifeless face. Her head tilted slightly, and her hollow eyes met his. Edgar froze, his breath caught in his throat. Lila? He stammered. Her lips curled into a twisted smile, and she raised her arms. The swamp water surged around Edgar, pulling him down as if it had a will of its own. He screamed, but the swamp swallowed the sound, just as it had swallowed Lila all those years ago. His struggles grew weaker until he disappeared beneath the surface. When the water stilled, Lila stood alone, her sorrowful gaze fixed on the spot where Edgar had vanished. She turned and slowly walked back into the swamp, her form fading into the mist. To this day, the swamp remains cursed, a place of eternal mourning. The drowned bride continues to haunt its waters, her presence a warning to all who venture too close. Some say she seeks justice for her untimely death. Others believe she searches for a love that was stolen from her. But all agree on one thing: those who see her face will never escape the swamp. On nights when the mist grows thick and the moonlight dances on the water, villagers swear they can hear her song. A haunting melody of love turned to sorrow, echoing endlessly through the marsh. And the black waters, ever hungry, wait for the next soul to claim. Story 4. The Rise of the Whiteeyed Demons. In the dark abyss of hell, where fire and shadows danced in eternal chaos, two beings stood above all others: Lilith, the first of her kind, and Alistair, her most loyal and ruthless disciple. They were known as the White-Eyed Demons, ancient entities whose power dwarfed even the mightiest of hell's generals. Their eyes, devoid of color or emotion, were said to pierce into the very soul, stripping away sanity and hope. Lilith was not born a demon. She was once human, the first woman molded from the same clay as Adam. Her defiance of heaven's will marked her for damnation. Cast out of Eden, Lilith wandered the wastelands, her heart filled with fury and betrayal. It was in her darkest moment that Lucifer found her. The morning star, fallen from grace, offered her a choice: eternal servitude in misery or unimaginable power to exact vengeance on those who had wronged her. Lilith chose power. In a blasphemous ritual, Lucifer transformed her into the first demon. Her humanity was stripped away, replaced by an unholy strength. Her eyes turned a pure, milky white, the mark of her new existence. Lilith became Hell's queen, a symbol of terror and authority, feared by angels and demons alike. Centuries later, Lilith found a mortal soul as cunning and cruel as herself. Alistair had been a torturer in life, delighting in the pain of others. When his mortal body perished, his soul descended into hell, where Lilith saw potential. She molded him into her disciple, teaching him the ancient arts of torment and destruction. Alistair's transformation was gruesome. He endured centuries of agony, his flesh and soul reforged in hellfire until he emerged as the second White-Eyed Demon. Together, Lilith and Alistair ruled with an iron fist, their names whispered in fear even among Hell's legions. The White-Eyed Demons were not content with ruling Hell. Lilith, driven by her hatred for heaven, sought to overthrow the celestial order. She and Alistair began forging an army, drawing on the darkest, most twisted souls to create a legion of unparalleled power. Angels who ventured into hell were captured and tortured, their screams echoing through the infernal depths as their grace was corrupted into demonic energy. The battlefields of the war were horrifying. Lilith and Alistair led their armies, tearing through angelic ranks with unrelenting fury. Their power was unmatched. Neither holy weapons nor divine light could harm them. Their white eyes burned with a malevolent glow, instilling terror in even the bravest angels. Only the archangels themselves dared to confront them, but even they struggled to contain the might of these ancient demons. Lilith's ultimate goal was to open the gates of hell and unleash its horrors upon Earth. She devised a ritual that required the blood of 13 Nephilim, children born of angels and humans. These beings were rare, their existence a violation of heaven's laws, but their blood was the key to breaking the barrier between realms. Alistair hunted the Nephilim with a sadistic glee, dragging them to Lilith's altar one by one. As the ritual neared completion, the skies darkened and the earth trembled. The barrier between hell and earth grew thin, and shadows began to seep into the mortal world. The angels, desperate to stop Lilith, descended upon earth in full force. Leading them was the Archangel Michael, heaven's mightiest warrior. The final battle took place on a desolate plain where the veil between realms was weakest. The ground cracked and burned as the forces of heaven and hell clashed. Lilith and Alistair stood at the center, their power radiating like a storm. Michael confronted Lilith, their battle shaking the heavens, while Alistair faced the Archangel Gabriel, whose blade of light was said to sever even the strongest bonds of darkness. Despite their power, the Whiteeyed demons were not invincible. Michael's blade, forged from the purest celestial energy, pierced Lilith's defenses, wounding her for the first time in millennia. Enraged, Alistair unleashed a torrent of dark energy, but Gabriel's light countered it, leaving both demons weakened. In a final act of defiance, Lilith poured her remaining strength into the ritual. The barrier between hell and earth shattered, and the infernal legions began to pour through. But before the gates could fully open, Michael struck Lilith down. Her body dissolved into ash, her soul bound in chains and cast into the void. Alistair, witnessing the fall of his queen, let out a roar of anguish. He attempted to complete the ritual himself, but Gabriel struck him with a blow that severed his connection to hell. Alistair's form crumbled, and his essence was scattered across the void, never to reform. The gates of hell slammed shut, and the earth was saved, but at a terrible cost. The battlefield was littered with the bodies of angels and demons alike. The scars of the war remained, and humanity, though unaware of the full extent of the battle, felt the lingering dread of what had transpired. The legend of the Whiteeyed demons became a warning, a tale of ambition and vengeance that nearly destroyed the world. But in the darkest corners of hell, whispers persisted. Some believed Lilith and Alistair were not truly gone, that their essence lingered, waiting for the day they could rise again. And in those shadows, the faint glow of white eyes could sometimes be seen, watching, waiting, and hungering for revenge. Story 5. The Queen of the Abyss. In the shadowed realm beyond mortal comprehension, there existed a dark legend, the Queen of the Abyss, a being born from the unholy union of blood magic and ancient curses. Known as Velmora, she was the high priestess of chaos, a figure feared even by the oldest demons. Her visage, terrifying yet mesmerizing, was adorned with runic symbols and infernal sigils etched into her flesh. Her crown of spiked horns was both a symbol of her dominion and a reminder of the unbreakable pact she made with the abyss itself. Centuries ago, Velmora was a mortal woman, a sorceress seeking power to avenge her family, who had been slaughtered by a corrupt monarchy. Velmora turned to forbidden texts and blood magic, rituals that promised vengeance at a steep price. She carved sigils into her own skin, drawing power from the ancient gods of chaos, the ones long sealed away by divine order. The final ritual required a sacrifice beyond imagination. Her humanity. She stood in a circle of inverted pentagrams, her blood pooling around her as she recited incantations in a language older than time. The ground split beneath her feet, and tendrils of black flame erupted, binding her soul to the abyss. Her mortal body burned away, replaced by a form both horrifying and divine. When the transformation was complete, Velmora emerged as the Queen of the Abyss. Her eyes glowed with crimson fire, her veins coursing with infernal energy. Her voice, a chilling blend of whispers and screams, commanded legions of shadows that obeyed her every word. Velmora's dominion stretched across the netherworld, a realm of eternal night where rivers of blood flowed, and the screams of the damned echoed endlessly. She ruled with an iron will, her mere presence instilling terror in even the most fearsome demons. Her body bore the marks of her power, sigils that pulsed with unholy energy, and a chest adorned with symbols of forgotten gods. Her crown of horns grew longer with each soul she consumed, a testament to her insatiable hunger for power. Under her rule, the netherworld flourished in chaos. Velmora sought not only dominion over her realm, but also revenge against the mortal world that had wronged her. She opened rifts between dimensions, sending her shadow legions to wreak havoc. Entire kingdoms fell to her wrath, their lands reduced to ash and their people transformed into mindless thralls. Despite her overwhelming power, a prophecy haunted Velmora's reign. It spoke of a warrior born under the crescent moon, bearing a blade forged in celestial fire, the only weapon capable of severing her connection to the abyss. This warrior, known as the Crescent Heir, was destined to challenge Velmora and bring balance to the realms. Velmora, determined to prevent the prophecy, sought out every Crescent-born child and had them sacrificed in her blood temples. Yet whispers of the heir persisted, spreading through both mortal and demonic realms. Velmora's fury grew, her wrath shaking the very foundation of her kingdom. She ordered her most loyal generals, abominations of her own creation, to hunt down the heir and extinguish the light that threatened her darkness. Years passed, and the rift between realms widened, plunging the mortal world into chaos. Velmora's influence seeped into every corner of existence, her sigils appearing in the skies as a grim omen of her arrival. Mortals cowered in fear, their prayers unanswered as the heavens grew silent. Then, on a blood moon night, the Crescent Heir appeared. Wielding the blade of Luminar, a weapon forged from celestial fire and imbued with the blessings of the forgotten gods, the heir marched into the netherworld. The blade's light burned through Velmora's shadow legions, their forms disintegrating into ash. The heir confronted Velmora in her throne room, a vast hall of obsidian, lit by rivers of molten blood. Velmora rose from her throne, her sigils glowing brighter as she unleashed her full power. Shadows coiled around her like serpents, and her horns crackled with dark energy. "You dare challenge me?" Velmora's voice echoed like 1,000 screams. "I am chaos incarnate. I am eternal." The heir said nothing, their blade glowing brighter with every step. The final battle began, a clash of light and darkness that shook both realms. Velmora summoned storms of shadow and fire, while the heir's blade cut through them with divine precision. The two were evenly matched, their power tearing the fabric of reality. But as the heir struck a fatal blow, plunging the blade of Luminar into Velmora's heart, the Queen of the Abyss let out a deafening scream. Her sigils burned with blinding light as her body disintegrated, releasing a surge of chaotic energy that collapsed her kingdom. The rift between realms closed, and the netherworld fell into silence. Though Velmora was defeated, her essence was not destroyed. Her sigils, now scattered across the realms, carried fragments of her power. Those who stumbled upon them were drawn into her lingering curse, their minds consumed by whispers of chaos. Velmora's crown of horns remains hidden in the ruins of her throne room, a relic of her reign. Legends say that whoever wears it will inherit her power and her eternal torment. And in the darkest corners of the netherworld, her voice still echoes, a chilling reminder that chaos never truly dies. Story 6. The Haunted Gate of Hollow's End. In the heart of an ancient forest, where no sunlight ever dared to pierce the thick canopy, stood the cursed village of Hollow's End. The villagers abandoned it centuries ago, leaving behind rotting homes and an eerie, crumbling bell tower. At the edge of the village stood a gate adorned with grinning jack-o'-lanterns, their twisted smiles glowing faintly even in the darkest nights. Local legends spoke of the gate as a portal to a cursed dimension, a place where the spirits of the restless dead roamed freely. Every Halloween, the gate came alive, its lanterns burning brighter, their flames flickering as though fueled by something otherworldly. Ravens circled above, their cries echoing through the trees, warning anyone foolish enough to approach. It was said that those who entered Hollow's End during this time would never return. Or worse, they would return changed. The tale of Hollow's End began with a man named Ezekiel Crow, a reclusive farmer who was known for his strange fascination with death. Ezekiel was feared by the villagers, who whispered that he practiced dark rituals in the dead of night. His farm was the source of the jack-o'-lanterns that decorated the village every Halloween, carved with grotesque faces, each one more sinister than the last. One fateful Halloween, a group of children dared to trespass onto Ezekiel's land, mocking his eccentricity. Furious, Ezekiel cursed them, vowing that their souls would be bound to the jack-o'-lanterns forever. That night, the villagers awoke to find the children missing, their laughter replaced by the eerie glow of newly carved pumpkins that lined the gate to Hollow's End. Each pumpkin bore the twisted visage of one of the missing children. Overcome with fear, the villagers stormed Ezekiel's farm, dragging him to the bell tower. They accused him of witchcraft and, in their rage, hanged him beneath the bell. As he died, Ezekiel laughed, his voice echoing through the village. "This place will be your doom," he cursed. "Every Halloween, you will hear the bell toll, and my lanterns will guide the dead to reclaim what is theirs." True to his words, the very next Halloween, the bell tolled on its own, and shadows began to stir within the forest. The villagers fled, abandoning Hollow's End to the curse that Ezekiel had unleashed generations later. Hollow's End became a legend, its story passed down as a cautionary tale to keep children from wandering too far into the woods. But not everyone heeded the warnings. On Halloween night, a group of thrill-seeking teenagers, Mark, Elena, Victor, and Claire, decided to test their courage by venturing into Hollow's End. Armed with flashlights and phones, they laughed off the old stories, convinced that the tales were nothing more than superstitions meant to scare children. As they approached the gate, the air grew colder, and an unnatural silence fell over the forest. The jack-o'-lanterns' grinning faces flickered to life, their flames casting eerie shadows across the ground. A crow landed on the gate, its piercing cry shattering the silence. The group hesitated, but Mark, the bravest, or most reckless of the group, pushed the gate open. The village was even more decrepit than they had imagined. The houses leaned at unnatural angles, their windows like dark eyes watching their every move. The bell tower loomed in the center, its silhouette a jagged wound against the cloudy sky. The bell, rusted and cracked, began to toll, though no one had touched it. The sound sent shivers down their spines, reverberating through the empty streets. As the group wandered deeper into the village, they began to notice strange things. Shadows moved in the corners of their vision, and whispers floated through the air, though no one was there. Elena swore she saw a pumpkin's carved face change as she walked past it, its grin widening into something far more sinister. When they reached the bell tower, Claire gasped. Beneath the bell hung a single noose, swaying gently in the windless air. Beneath it, carved into the wooden floorboards, were the words, "One must pay the toll." The group laughed nervously, brushing it off as a prank by someone who had visited the village before. But when Victor turned to leave, he froze. Standing at the gate was a figure in tattered clothes, its face obscured by a pumpkin with glowing eyes. It raised a hand, and more figures emerged from the shadows, each wearing a similar pumpkin mask. They moved slowly, deliberately, blocking every path out of the village. Panic set in as the group ran, but no matter which way they turned, the figures were always there, herding them back toward the bell tower. The lanterns lining the streets burned brighter, their flames flickering with an almost mocking intensity. Whispers grew louder, transforming into guttural laughter. Back at the bell tower, Mark noticed something horrifying. The pumpkins weren't masks, they were heads. The figures' rotting hands reached out, their movements jerky and unnatural. The group huddled together, their terror mounting as the bell tolled louder and faster. The inscription on the floorboards glowed faintly, and Elena screamed as she realized its meaning. "One of us has to stay," she said, tears streaming down her face. "It's the only way out." Mark, ever the leader, stepped forward. "I'll do it," he said, his voice shaking but resolute. He climbed the stairs to the bell, gripping the rope as the figures closed in. As he rang the bell one last time, the pumpkin-headed figures stopped, their heads tilting as if in satisfaction. Mark disappeared into the shadows, his scream echoing through the village. The figures turned and faded into the mist, leaving the others trembling but alive. The gate swung open, and the lantern's flames extinguished, plunging the village into darkness. Elena, Victor, and Claire stumbled out of Hollow's End, their relief short-lived as they realized they were forever marked. Every Halloween, they heard the bell toll, no matter where they were. Shadows lingered in their homes, and their reflections in mirrors sometimes bore twisted grins. In Hollow's End, Mark's face joined the other pumpkins at the gate, his eyes glowing faintly as he watched, waiting for the next foolish soul to enter. And the bell tower remained, its silent noose swaying, ready to claim another life. Story 7. The Demon's Bride. In a kingdom shrouded in shadows, far from the reach of the sun's warmth, there was a tale whispered only in secret. It spoke of a cursed demon known as Astaroth, who lived in the desolate mountains. Astaroth was a creature of great power and terror, his body massive and covered in gray, stone-like flesh, his horns twisting upward like the branches of a dead tree, and his eyes burning crimson with eternal fury. Legends claimed that he was bound to the mortal plane by a pact of blood and sorrow, cursed to exist in isolation until he found something he had long since lost: love. The tale begins with Isolde, a young woman of rare beauty, her golden hair cascading like rivers of sunlight and her eyes reflecting the clearest skies. She lived in a small village at the foot of the cursed mountains. Her life was simple, but her beauty drew envy and desire, especially from the village chieftain, a cruel man named Kellen. Kellen sought to claim Isolde as his bride, but she refused him, her heart yearning for freedom and choice. Enraged by her defiance, Kellen framed Isolde for witchcraft, accusing her of bringing misfortune upon the village. The terrified villagers, bound by superstition, dragged Isolde to the mountains as an offering to Astaroth, hoping to appease the demon and rid themselves of his looming curse. Trembling, Isolde was left at the mouth of a cavern, the villagers fleeing as the air grew thick with a suffocating darkness. Astaroth emerged, his towering figure filling the space with dread. Isolde expected death, but Astaroth paused, his burning eyes softening as he gazed at her. For the first time in centuries, he saw not fear in someone's eyes, but defiance and sorrow. "What do you offer in exchange for your life?" Astaroth's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "My life is not my own to offer," Isolde replied, her voice steady despite her fear. "If you seek payment, take me, but spare my village." Amused by her courage, Astaroth made a pact. He would spare the village, but Isolde would become his bride, bound to him for eternity. With no other choice, Isolde agreed, sealing her fate with a single tear. Astaroth took Isolde to his lair, a grand, crumbling castle hidden deep within the mountains. Though his appearance was monstrous, his actions were not. He treated her with care, offering her the finest foods, clothing, and a place to call her own. Over time, Isolde saw glimpses of the man Astaroth once was, buried beneath the layers of his curse. He spoke of a time before his damnation, of a love he had lost and a betrayal that had bound him to his monstrous form. In return, Isolde shared her own pain, her dreams of freedom and the injustices she had endured. Slowly, their companionship grew into something unexpected. Astaroth found solace in her presence, and Isolde began to see beauty in his soul, even as his monstrous form haunted her. But their fragile happiness was not meant to last. Word of Isolde's survival reached the village, and with it, Kellen's wrath. He rallied a group of mercenaries, spreading lies that Isolde had bewitched the demon to do her bidding. Armed with weapons blessed by a wandering priest, they ascended the mountain, determined to slay Astaroth and reclaim Isolde. The attack came on a night when the mountains were veiled in a heavy mist. Astaroth fought fiercely, his monstrous strength unmatched, but the blessed weapons burned his flesh, weakening him. Isolde, horrified, tried to intervene, but Kellen captured her, threatening to kill her if Astaroth did not surrender. For the first time in centuries, Astaroth knelt, his massive frame bowing before the men, his crimson eyes dimmed with sorrow. "Spare her, and I will give myself to your blade," he said. But Kellen, driven by spite, raised his sword to strike both the demon and Isolde. In that moment, Astaroth's fury erupted. His body surged with a dark, fiery energy, and he tore through the mercenaries, his wrath consuming everything in its path. The castle trembled as the mountain threatened to collapse. Amid the chaos, Isolde ran to Astaroth, her hands gentle on his scarred and burning skin. "Stop," she whispered, her voice breaking through his rage. "You are not a monster." Her words calmed him, but the damage was done. The castle began to crumble, and the last of the mercenaries fled. Astaroth, now weakened beyond repair, fell to his knees. Isolde held him, tears streaming down her face. "You saved me," she said. "Now let me save you." With the last of his strength, Astaroth explained how the curse could be broken. A true act of love must be freely given, even in the face of death. Without hesitation, Isolde kissed him, her love breaking through the barrier of his monstrous form. Astaroth's body glowed, his flesh shifting, and for a moment, he became the man he once was, handsome, kind, and human. But curses are never broken without sacrifice. As the light faded, Astaroth smiled sadly. "Thank you, my love," he said. His body turned to ash, carried away by the wind. Leaving Isolde alone in the ruins of the castle, Isolde returned to the village. Not as a victim, but as a woman transformed by love and loss. She became a legend, the woman who tamed a demon and saved a village. The villagers, ashamed of their actions, rebuilt her life, giving her the freedom she had always desired. But on quiet nights, when the moon hung low over the mountains, Isolde would look toward the ruins of the castle. Some say she could still feel Astaroth's presence, his love lingering like a warm shadow. And in the darkest corners of the world, those who threatened her peace would find themselves haunted by the demon's crimson eyes, a reminder that love, even in its darkest form, could never truly die. Story 8. The Curse of Vinle. In a remote village called Vinle, nestled deep in a dense forest, a curse loomed that no one dared speak of aloud. Under the pale moonlight, the village seemed eerily serene, but the locals knew better. They barred their doors and windows as soon as the sun dipped below the horizon, for the legend of the Chudale, a malevolent, vengeful spirit, had plagued their home for centuries. The villagers claimed to hear her blood-curdling laughter echoing through the forest at night. Her glowing red eyes pierced the darkness, and those unfortunate enough to meet her gaze would vanish without a trace, leaving only the faint scent of burnt wood behind. She was said to haunt the forest paths, hunting for wandering souls who dared challenge the curse. The curse began long ago, when a woman named Sanvi, a healer and herbalist, was falsely accused of witchcraft. Jealousy brewed in the heart of the village leader, Thakur Ramesh, who feared Sanvi's growing influence. He branded her a witch, claiming her potions brought misfortune and death. The villagers, blind with fear, dragged Sanvi to the outskirts of the village and set her ablaze under the sacred banyan tree. As the flames consumed her, Sanvi screamed not in pain but in fury. She cursed the villagers, vowing to return and take revenge on their descendants. Her ashes scattered with the wind, but her wrath lingered, becoming the spirit that haunted the forest and village. Years later, the curse continued to terrorize the villagers. One fateful night, a young boy named Arjun ventured into the forest. He was not like the others, for he was curious and unafraid of the stories. Armed with only a lantern given to him by his grandmother, who claimed it had been blessed by a wandering priest, Arjun set out to uncover the truth about the Chudale. As he stepped into the forest, the air grew colder, and the sounds of the village faded into silence. The trees seemed alive, their branches clawing at the sky, and the faint smell of burning wood lingered in the air. Arjun's lantern flickered, casting long shadows across the ground. He could feel eyes watching him, though he saw no one. Suddenly, a bone-chilling laugh echoed through the trees. Arjun froze, his breath hitching as a figure emerged from the darkness. The Chudale stood before him, her hair wild and flowing like a dark river, her eyes glowing red, and her mouth twisted into a horrifying grin. "Why have you come, boy?" she hissed, her voice dripping with malice. Despite his fear, Arjun stood his ground. "I've come to end your curse," he said, his voice trembling but resolute. The Chudale laughed, a sound that sent shivers down his spine. "You? A mere child? What makes you think you can defeat me?" Arjun held up the lantern, its glow brighter than before. "This lantern was blessed to protect me from evil. I will not leave until you tell me how to free this village from your curse." The Chudale's laughter ceased, and her grin faltered. She circled Arjun, her movements fluid and unnatural. "You are brave," she admitted, "but bravery alone will not save you. The only way to end my curse is to restore what was taken from me." "What did they take from you?" Arjun asked. "My life," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with sorrow. "My love for this village, my chance to heal and help. To lift my curse, you must do what they could not. You must bring my soul peace." The Chudale told Arjun to retrieve the ashes buried beneath the banyan tree where she was burned. He was to scatter them in the sacred river flowing through the forest, a ritual that would cleanse her spirit and lift the curse. But she warned him, "The villagers will try to stop you. They fear me, and they will fear what you do." With dawn approaching, Arjun raced back to the village. He dug beneath the banyan tree, finding the ashes wrapped in charred cloth. As he turned to leave, he was confronted by the villagers, led by the village elder. They shouted accusations, calling him a fool for meddling with the Chudale's remains. Ignoring their cries, Arjun fled toward the river. The villagers chased him, but the forest seemed to aid him. Branches blocked their path, and the ground beneath them became treacherous. Finally, Arjun reached the riverbank as the first light of dawn broke through the trees. Arjun scattered the ashes into the river, reciting the prayer his grandmother had taught him. The water shimmered, and a blinding light engulfed the forest. The Chudale appeared one last time, her form no longer monstrous but serene and radiant. "Thank you, Arjun," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You have done what no one else dared. My curse is lifted, and my soul can finally rest." With that, she faded into the light, leaving behind a sense of calm that the village had not felt in centuries. The forest grew quiet, and the once ominous banyan tree blossomed with flowers. When Arjun returned to the villagers were in awe of his bravery. They begged for his forgiveness and vowed never to let fear and hatred cloud their judgment again. The story of Arjun and the Chudale became a legend, a tale of courage, redemption, and the power of compassion. From that day forward, the lantern Arjun carried was kept in the village temple, its light a symbol of hope and a reminder that even the darkest curses can be broken by the light of a brave heart. Story 9. The Keeper of Souls. In a forgotten corner of the world, where shadows consumed the light and whispers of the dead lingered in the wind, there was a legend of a being known only as the Keeper of Souls. Cloaked in a tattered robe that seemed woven from darkness itself, with a skeletal face void of emotion, the Keeper was said to be neither living nor dead. He was an eternal entity, bound to wander between realms, harvesting the souls of the damned. The image of the Keeper haunted the minds of all who dared to speak of him. His empty sockets burned with an otherworldly glow, as though he could see into the very essence of a person. They said his arrival was heralded by a chill that froze the air and a deathly silence that consumed all sound. At the edge of a cursed forest lay a village called Dread Hollow, a place plagued by misfortune. Crops failed, livestock died, and those who ventured too far into the forest never returned. The villagers whispered that the Keeper of Souls had made the forest his domain, and they lived in fear of his coming. One fateful evening, as a dense fog rolled into the village, the bell in the old chapel tolled 13 times, a sign that death was near. The villagers gathered in their homes, clutching charms and praying to gods who no longer seemed to listen. Among them was a young man named Elior, whose family had been the latest victims of the forest's curse. His father had vanished, his mother had succumbed to an unknown illness, and his sister had been found lifeless near the edge of the woods. Elior, driven by grief and anger, refused to hide. He stood in the village square, a lantern in one hand and a blade in the other, vowing to confront the source of their suffering. As midnight approached, the fog thickened and the air grew cold. From the depths of the mist, a figure emerged. The Keeper of Souls stood before Elior, his hollow eyes fixed on him. The lantern's light flickered, casting eerie shadows across the skeletal visage. "Why do you seek me, mortal?" The Keeper's voice was like the wind through dead trees, soft, hollow, and ancient. Elior tightened his grip on the blade. "You've taken everything from me, my family, my village. I won't let you claim another soul." The Keeper tilted his head, the movement slow and deliberate. "I do not take, I collect. The souls I harvest are already lost, bound by their sins and regrets. Your family was no exception." "Lies!" Elior shouted. "They were good people. They didn't deserve this." The Keeper extended a bony hand, and the fog around them shifted, revealing spectral images of Elior's family. His father, clutching a bag of stolen gold. his mother brewing a potion of poison, his sister setting fire to a barn in the neighboring village. Elior staggered back, his mind reeling. "No," he whispered, "this isn't real." "They were bound by their choices," the keeper said. "I merely guided them to their rightful fate." Desperation overtook Elior. "Then take me instead. Let their souls go. I'll do whatever you ask." The keeper was silent for a long moment, the air growing colder still. "A noble offer," he said, "but one that comes with a cost. If you wish to take their place, you must become like me, a keeper, bound to wander the realms, collecting the souls of the damned." Elior hesitated. The thought of becoming what he hated filled him with dread, but the vision of his family's tortured spirits was unbearable. "I accept," he said, his voice trembling. The keeper raised his staff, the tip glowing with an unholy light. Shadows coiled around Elior, pulling him to his knees. His flesh withered, his bones protruded, and his humanity burned away. When the transformation was complete, Elior rose, his body cloaked in darkness, his eyes empty and glowing. "You are now a keeper," the entity said. "Your family's souls are free, but their fate is not changed, and neither is yours." Elior, now a keeper of souls, wandered the realms, harvesting those bound by sin and regret. He walked the same cursed forest, his mind a fog of memories, both his own and those of the damned he collected. His lantern no longer guided him home, but illuminated the path to oblivion for others. In Dread Hollow, the villagers noticed that the fog no longer crept into their homes, and the bell tolled no more. But they spoke in hushed voices of a second figure that now roamed the woods, his form cloaked in shadows, his eyes glowing like distant embers. And deep within the forest, the Keeper of Souls watched, a faint trace of amusement in his hollow gaze. For he knew that every soul, even those who sacrificed everything for others, would eventually join his collection. Story 10. The Cradle of Shadows. In the small, fog-shrouded town of Ebon Hollow, there was an abandoned manor that no one dared to enter. Its windows were shattered, its walls cloaked in ivy, and its doors seemed to groan even when no wind blew. Legend spoke of strange cries that echoed from within, faint whispers of laughter and weeping in the dead of night. At the heart of these tales was a cursed cradle, said to hold a child born not of man and woman, but of pure darkness. The townsfolk referred to the being as the Devil's Child. They believed that long ago the manor belonged to Lady Amara, a wealthy woman who had spent years mourning the loss of her infant son. Desperate to bring him back, she sought the help of forbidden magic, performing rituals in the dead of night and making a pact with an ancient shadowy force. One fateful evening, under a blood-red moon, Amara completed the final ritual. The house trembled, and a bone-chilling wind swept through the halls as the shadows themselves seemed to congeal in the nursery. When the candles sputtered out, a faint cry echoed from the cradle. Amara, trembling, approached the crib and saw the child. At first glance, it appeared almost human, but its eyes were too large and too black, gleaming with a sinister intelligence far beyond its years. Its grin stretched unnaturally wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Its tiny hands ended in claw-like fingers, and its pale skin was so thin it almost seemed translucent. Amara, blinded by grief and longing, ignored the creature's unnatural appearance. She cradled it, whispering, "My son, you've returned to me." But she would soon learn the terrible price of her bargain. The Devil's Child grew quickly. Too quickly. Within weeks, it could crawl with an unsettling speed, its laughter echoing like nails on glass. It delighted in cruel mischief, shattering mirrors, extinguishing fires, and whispering terrifying secrets into Amara's ear at night. As months passed, its power grew stronger, and the shadows in the manor seemed alive, writhing and reaching out to anyone who dared enter. The townsfolk began to notice strange occurrences. Crops withered, livestock disappeared, and a strange sickness spread through the village. They traced it back to the manor and demanded Amara cast the creature out. But when they arrived, the house was silent, the door swinging open as if inviting them in. Those who entered never returned. Years later, as the manor decayed and the legend grew, a stranger arrived in Ebon Hollow. His name was Gabriel, a hunter of the supernatural, carrying with him a bag of charms, holy relics, and a blade said to sever the ties between the living and the damned. The townsfolk warned him against entering the manor, but Gabriel was resolute. "If the stories are true," he said, "that thing cannot be allowed to exist." Gabriel entered the manor at dusk, his lantern casting flickering light across the crumbling walls. The air was thick with the stench of decay, and the sound of faint, childlike giggles echoed from the shadows. As he ascended the stairs, the laughter grew louder, accompanied by the faint creak of a rocking cradle. In the nursery, Gabriel found the cradle. Inside sat the creature, its wide black eyes staring up at him, its grin revealing teeth sharp as daggers. It tilted its head, studying him like prey. "Are you here to play with me?" it asked, its voice sweet yet chilling. Gabriel drew his blade, the metal glowing faintly in the presence of evil. "Your time in this world is over," he said, his voice steady. The creature hissed, its small body erupting into a swarm of shadows that filled the room. The walls seemed to close in, and the air grew cold as the shadows lashed at Gabriel like living tendrils. He swung his blade, the holy relic slicing through the darkness, causing it to shriek and recoil. But the creature was cunning. It reformed behind him, its claws raking across his back, drawing blood. Gabriel stumbled but did not falter. He threw a charm into the air, and a circle of light surrounded him, holding the shadows at bay. "You cannot banish me," the creature snarled, its voice deeper now, echoing with an inhuman growl. "I was born of darkness. I am eternal." Gabriel gritted his teeth. "Even darkness has its end." He plunged the blade into the creature's chest, and the room erupted in blinding light. The shadows screamed and writhed as the creature dissolved into ash, its cries fading into silence. When Gabriel emerged from the manor at dawn, the townsfolk gathered, their faces filled with awe and relief. The oppressive darkness that had hung over the village was gone, and the air felt lighter. Gabriel said nothing of what he had seen, but handed the village elder a charm to seal the manor forever. Yet, as Gabriel walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something lingered. In the distance, the faint sound of a baby's laughter echoed through the morning air. The manor now stands as a crumbling ruin, avoided by all. Some say the devil's child was not destroyed, but merely banished, waiting for another desperate soul to summon it back. And on nights when the moon turns red, the sound of a rocking cradle can still be heard, accompanied by a sinister, toothy grin in the dark.